welcome back to my channel. Just Shauna here to talk about some friggin' stats changes. Why I am the worst, I don't know, but this continues to happen to me where I make a video talking about my rating system, my rating scale, or I did a bookshelf tour once, and then I will promptly go change something about it. So I did a bookshelf tour and then promptly rearranged my shelves, maybe a week after doing it. And then I did my rating thing and changed it maybe a few days later. And just recently, I posted my 2019 stats video and I'm changing my spreadsheet. So we're talking about that today. Basically, the things that I'm going to be tracking while reading books in 2020. So I'm going to continue keeping track of the month that I'm reading, even though I don't do monthly wrap-ups. At the end of the year, I still like to see in each month how many books I read. I talked about this in my 2019 stats video. Instead of doing specific individual diversity categories, I'm just going to go back to tracking if a book is diverse or not, just diverse in some fashion. I already read pretty diversely just naturally, and I think that is something that I have kind of a habit I have cultivated over the last couple of years of just being more aware of diverse books that are coming out and being talked about and just kind of being on the lookout for that. Age range, I always track that just to see, YA versus adult versus new adult, how many books in each age range that I'm reading. And then the genre, I did change up the genre options a little bit. And then something I'm going to be tracking because I realized that in 2019, I read a lot of books that were the first book in a series. And I'm not someone who necessarily cares that much if I'm in the middle of a bunch of series. I read fantasy, so I'm kind of always in the middle of a bunch of different series, and that's fine with me. But I do kind of want to make a little bit more of an effort to continue series that I want to continue. So the first new thing I'm going to track is what part of a series a book is in. And the options are that it's the start of a series, the middle of a series, the end of a series, a bind up, if it's like The Way of Thorn and Thunder is a perfect example of this. It's hella long because it's actually a bind up of a series. Or if it's a standalone, because I do read some standalone books. And then I'm going to track if I'm going to continue with the series. So the options for will continue are yes, no, maybe, or not applicable, because if it's not a series, it's not applicable. And then I will continue tracking the format, if it's a library book, owned book, ebook, etc. The amount of money saved if it is a library book. And then last year I kept track of if it was a reread, how many times I had reread it, but I'm changing that up and I'm just gonna keep track of if it is a reread or not. I still have if it's the one reread, two rereads, three or more rereads, but then I added no if it's just not a reread. Because I want to actually keep that statistic, keep track of that statistic. So those are the changes to the statistics I'm going to keep track of. I also have changed my rating scale again. Because I realize that I'm very harsh with 5 stars, okay? Looking at my 1 to 10 scale, the range for a 2-star is from 2.3 to 4.5, right? So it's over 2 points. In that range, that's a 2-star. So there's a lot of room for a book to be a 2-star. And that I just determined based on how I feel. If a book is a 4.5, I still feel kind of
you're a 2-star book.
And then the rest of them are a little bit more tight. So a 2.5 is 4.6 through 5.2, right? So that's a really tight window. 3 is 5.3 to 6.5. 3.5 is super tight, 6.6 to 6.9. And then 7 to 7.6 is 4. And I think this is where it changed because let me double check. Yeah, so my previous one at 4, it was 7 to 7.9. That was 4 stars. So I tightened that to 7 to 7.6. And then 4.5 was 8 to 8.9. And 5 was 9 to 10. And so I changed it where 4.5 is 7.7 to 8.2. And then 5 is 8.3 to 10. So there's more room for a book to be a 5-star read for me. Because yeah, I just felt like I was being really harsh. And I think it's because in my head, I've always thought like 5 stars needs to be basically perfection. But no book, I don't know, there's very few books I read where I'm like, there's nothing wrong with this. There are books that I love and there's almost nothing wrong with them. And I just want to tell everybody about it and I just love it so much. It just was bugging me that I was being so strict with 5 stars, but then being really loosey-goosey with like the lower star ratings, you know? And so this means that a few of my books have changed ratings in previous years. So I went back through books from I think 2018 and 2019. Yes, and any of them that now the rating is different because I have adjusted my rating scale, I wrote them down and I'm gonna go over them now. So I had some that went from a 3 to a 2.5 because at the time that I read them, I didn't have 2.5. So the books that went from 3 to 2.5 are The Iron King by Julie Kagawa, which I read in 2018, Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson, which I also read in 2018, and then The Wolf by Leo Carew, which I read in 2019. And then one book went from a 3.5 to a 3, and that was You Bring the Distant Near by Mitali Perkins, which I read in 2018. And now we're getting into books that went up a rating. So from 3 to 3.5. Far from the Tree by Robin Benway, which I read in 2018. Saga Volume 8 by Brian Vaughan, also 28. All these are 2018. Fables Volume 1 by Bill Willingham. And Pushing 30 by Nicole Reese. And then from 4 to 4.5, we have Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets by J.K. Rowling. Age of Myth by Michael J. Sullivan, 2018. The Bells, Danielle Clayton, 2018. And The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, which I also read in 2018. Queen of Sorrow by Sarah Beth Durst. And then Empty Mansions by Bill Dedman. And then quite a few books that went from 4.5 to now being 5-star reads for me. Born a Crime by Trevor Noah in 2018. And the rest I think are all 2019. Pride by E.B. Zaboy. Definitely should have been a 5. I love that book. Age of War by Michael J. Sullivan. The Demon King by Cinda Williams-Chima. That was a reread in 2019. Age of Legend by Michael J. Sullivan. The Reluctant Queen by Sarah Beth Durst. And then The Guinevere Deception by Kirsten White. So all of those ratings are now changed. Now, did I go change them on Goodreads yet? No. But if there were a 1/2-star, usually I go up anyway. My categories for my 1 to 10 scale, I also adjusted slightly. So the first one is characters. That did not change. And I wrote down like what I'm asking myself, and that is, did I like the characters and feel that they were complex and made sense? World building is, did the world make sense and did I have a good idea of the larger world? Writing style, what I'm asking myself is, was the writing style good / memorable / enjoyable? And then plot, logical plot is what I actually changed the heading to. And so I'm just asking myself, did the plot make sense? This one is entirely new. Themes. It used to be memorable / impact, but that wasn't really working for me personally, so I changed it to themes. And the question I'm asking myself there is, did the book talk about anything? And if so, were those themes executed well, in my opinion? And then a good time. Did I have a good time reading this book? And I've never really specified what, like on my 1 to 10, what the different like numbers I give each category mean. So I did that for myself. I just always kind of go by like feeling, but 1 or 2 is that it was horrible. Whatever the category is, just was not done well. It was bad, in my opinion, again. 3 to 4 is pretty bad. Like, it was pretty bad, but not just horrible. 5 and 6 is mediocre. It was fine. You know, nothing wrong with it, but nothing really standing out about it. 7 and 8 is solid. Like, it was done pretty well. I liked it. Whatever. And then 9 or 10 is that it was great, that it was done very, very well, in my opinion. That is all. Hopefully somebody found this interesting. I don't know. I just figured I made like enough changes that it might be kind of cool to talk about, specifically the books that like the ratings changed. I don't know. I was clearly having a good time doing that. I went through all those books. As always, thank you so much for your time. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.